Welcome, everybody, to the Troubadour podcast. Today, we're going to talk about sculptures. And I'm super excited because after music, this is probably the art that I know the least about. And so I brought on Dianne Durante. Am I saying your last name correctly? I apologize.
Exactly, like Jimmy, but no relation.
Okay, who has been writing on art and art history for 3 decades. And she is actually the one who... several years ago in an article inspired me, or taught me, I should say, and inspired me on how to look at visual art. So I've been getting a lot of comments and feedback from the last couple of conversations I've had on my show where I've talked about visual art. And a lot of that is, I'm looking at new art that Dianne did not introduce me to necessarily, but it's from her methods that I originally got started into that whole world of painting. So thank you for teaching me that, for one.
It is so delightful to hear that I'm having that effect.
Yes.
That's exactly what I started out to do.
Absolutely. And I think sculpture will probably be one of my next forays into art. Music is one that I'm trying, and I'm classical music, and I've always listened to it, but I've never had quite the experience that some people talk about.
Right.
But with painting and literature has been my homestead for my whole life. That's my starting point. But so today we're going to talk about sculptures, and we're going to talk about how to see and teaching people how to see art and sculptures, which is a big part of your latest book, which I highly recommend everybody, which is getting more enjoyment from sculpture you love. And now, we're going to talk about this a lot. We're actually going to show some sculptures on the show and talk about it. So make sure you check that out and give us your feedback on what you like, what sculptures you like. But I want to say that before we, I let Dianne speak, I'm going to kind of plug some stuff for her because I'm so excited about this. I regret to say I've been to New York City twice and have not seen any of these sculptures, which is just an absolute tragedy. I have almost like this fear, like, oh my gosh, what if I die or something like that, and I don't get to see these? And I went to New York, and how crazy is that? And even without having seen them. So if you have not been big into sculpture like I was not, I really recommend this book because it, like we're going to talk about today, teaches you how to see them, and it's a good travel companion. So, a lot of times you think, what should I do on these vacations? Right? You kind of, if you're like me, you might just walk around, see the normal sights.
Yeah.
But you there is such a thing as a tour, and you don't have to necessarily take a tour from a person. You can actually just get a book that shows, here, go to this place, go to this place, go to that place. So I thought, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but, I want to bring you into this conversation now, rather than just me rambling about you for 3 minutes. But can you tell us a little bit about your tours and what you do with your tours in New York City?
Well, the tours, since I don't live full-time in New York City anymore, I don't do them that much. And I'm planning at some point to start putting together lists of things, say, that you could go see in the financial district, and related pieces that you could see for yourself. And I did want to say before I forget that when I started doing outdoor sculpture in New York, which was just around 9/11, I was trying to find out a name for a website, and you do the adjectives and the nouns, and the name I came up with was Forgotten Delights, because people just don't look at them. People never do. So it's not just you. It's most people. They're big, they're bronze, they're dark, and you have no idea. Most of them are portrait sculptures. If you don't know who they are, why would you stop?
And you don't know how to look at them.
Yeah.
I've seen this all the time, and it was very, when I started learning about painting, for instance, I have a story about this where I was dating this girl and we were at this, or we had I don't know if we were at a museum or maybe it was at someone's house, and they had one of those big books from the Met that has tons of paintings. Yes. And, she plopped down on the couch and looked at it, but the way she looked at it really bothered me. And because she just kind of flipped through them in the same way that we flip through, that we scroll through Instagram.
Mhm.
and it's like, oh, that's pretty. Oh, he's getting fat. Like, oh, look at
Yeah.
this, look at that. And it's like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no. That's not how you look at art. Now, you
Yeah.
can't analyze every piece of artwork, which I say
No.
on every show, but at some point, when you're looking at the greatest art in the world at the Met or something, you should
Yeah.
stop, even if it's a
At
book.
least slow down,
At least slow
You,
down.
you flip and then you see something that grabs you. There's got to be something at the map that grabs you.
Yeah. And then you need to know how to go about it. I think like at first I kind of had like a procedure, but now I just kind of look at a work of art and just
Mhm.
kind of go where my mind naturally goes because I've done it enough.
Yeah.
And that's where I hope to help people get through it. And these kinds of books that you can get this on Amazon. We'll put links in the show. Getting More Enjoyment from Sculpture You Love helps you with that procedure, and it gives you lots of examples with real artwork, which is what
Yeah.
you need to get good at this. So
Yeah. Because if you just talk about academically, the theme, the stylization of the blah, 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 you lose people.
yeah,
It has to be concrete or it's not going to get them. Um, I think of what I do as helping you get from the visual to the verbal.
mm,
Because the first time that I heard somebody give a really good analysis of art was Marianne Suarez, who she wrote Metaphysics in Marble in The Objectivist back in the 60s, I think. Really good article on Greek sculpture versus medieval sculpture. And she used to give talks every now and then at the Objectivist conferences. And so she gave this brilliant talk, which is not published, on different people's emotional reactions to specific works of art and what she saw in them that would lead to that emotion. And I was just thrilled. I was so excited, and I realized I had no idea how to get to that myself when I started looking at a work of art like the geographer. You know, I write well, but I don't know what to do. So I spend a lot of time figuring out the steps, how you can get in tiny little sensible steps from just looking at it and having a gut reaction, which is fine, to being able to talk and think about it, which lets you have a whole nother level of understanding, of interest, if you know what it's actually about.
yeah, and it's really hard to convey without actually going into the art, which is why I wanted to bring it up because I read this from a book on poetry, where she's teaching about poetry, and she said you can't really like the only way to really teach poetry is to read poetry. Like the only way to get an understanding of it, and that's true. Like you can talk about it, you can analyze it, and the analysis can be wonderful, but on some level, I mean, the only way to really understand it is to experience it.
Mm-hmm.
And just like in a lot of experiences, it's hard to convey. But I think art is a little bit of a special category in that way, where it feels. This is the feeling I've had in my growth as a appreciator, understander of art.
Yeah.
Is it feels like there's a hidden superhero, like superpower that
Yeah.
humans have. Like they have the ability to fly and they don't know it. So when I
Uh-huh.
talk to people and they're not into art, it's like they don't know that they have this special power. They just need to learn how to activate.
Yeah.
And by understanding and exploring art on some level, you don't have to do it full
Yeah.
time. You don't have to spend as much time as maybe Dianne or I do, but
Yeah.
some amount of time, just like you go to the gym every day or a couple of days a week, you go to a museum or like, go read a novel
Yeah.
or just experience it.
Look at the picture book from the Metropolitan Museum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something. Have a painting of Vermeer behind you. By the way, before the show, you were telling me about this Vermeer painting, which blew my mind. And I wanted to share that with
See,
the people on the show.
there. That's the whole Vermeer painting. You can see that, right? The whole thing?
Yes. Oh yeah. Beautiful.
That's Vermeer's Geographer, and the actual painting is maybe 12 by 12, 14 by, excuse me. It's not nearly as large as this.
The original.
The original is maybe a quarter. So the fact that the people who did this reproduction can blow it up that much more tells you something about the detail that Vermeer puts in there, the sharpness of the detail.
Yeah.
It's It's one of my favorite paintings.
Yeah, I mean,
And
Vermeer's a wonderful painter, but why do you think he painted so small? That's interesting to me. Does it allow him to give more, you know, emphasis on the light, which I know is a big
so
issue
I
for?
think it's he really likes detail, and he's got this almost mathematical balance. If you start looking at his paintings and you imagine uh, the window larger or the wardrobe shifted, uh, something goes off kilter. It's like he just really likes to work on this level. There are people who, like Rembrandt, who like to work on canvases 12 feet wide, but that's not what he likes to do. He
Yeah,
likes really precise. And the reason that I like this so much is that I always think it shows a moment of inspiration because he looks like he's just paused.
yeah,
Something just occurred to him and he's just stopped to think about it and,
yeah,
wait for that kind of moment when you say, oh, the integration, it's very exciting.
yeah. And I think
Uh,
we've all had that, and sometimes in our life,
mhm.
hopefully a couple times. And I know exactly what that feels like, so I can feel it just by looking at it. When maybe get older and you're not in the school mode as much, and so maybe
Mhm.
you're not in the habit of doing it as much, as in terms of like integrating new knowledge, which you should always be doing.
Mhm.
That that could be a really good reminder of, hey, this is possible to me, to find something that is like revolutionary or revelatory in my own
Yes.
mind,
Yes.
of some new information and new way of looking at the world, which I hope this podcast does for people. This episode, and because we're going to talk about Nathan Hale and some other cool sculptures. But first, I want to wrap up some things about this travel logs and this tradition that I think you're in, with teaching people how to see, in your case, art.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that traveling is a pretty new, relatively new endeavor in human history, right? It's something that came about, as far as I understand, in the 1700s. I'm talking about like on a mass scale. Of course, people always traveled for trade, things like that. But in the 1700s, there was this new middle class starting to be born, and more, or middle class ish, and more people were able to go travel. So there was a new industry to sell them things like books. Books
Mhm.
of poetry were big. And then books like this that would teach you, like, go to this site, go to this site, go to that site.
Yes.
And that's a whole industry that's now booming, I think.
Right.
And it should be, because we're now able, I mean, today, unfortunately, we're not able to travel, but in our, because we're recording this during the COVID pandemic. But, I'm very excited for once this is over, because traveling will hopefully boom again, I hope.
Yes.
And I'm sure a lot of people are getting antsy to go travel. I know a lot of people put their travel plans on hold. And so
Right.
this is a great book, by the way. I'm going to keep plugging it because I think it's so wonderful to, to get now and then prepare when you go to New York City. And, I know you have other books about other locations as well, right? This one's almost all New York City, right?
That, yeah, with one exception,
Yeah.
the Puritan, and even the Puritan, you could see a small version in the Metropolitan Museum. I do a lot of New York because I can get all the angles, and for
Yeah.
sculpture, you really need to see a lot of different angles, and the photos in that book are just angle after angle because it makes a big difference in noticing the details. Um, that article that you mentioned earlier on paintings, those are three paintings that are in the Frick collection, which is also in New York City.
Yeah. Let me
And
show people that, if that, while you're this article. So if you go to theobjectivestandard.com, this is the article that started it for me. And it's how to analyze and appreciate paintings. And what is really wonderful about your method is that you have, explain the abstract, the theory to some degree, but you really focus on the examples and then pulling it out through actually
mhm,
doing it. And
yeah.
so I found myself analyzing a painting that I didn't think you could analyze. Like, I literally didn't think you could analyze portraits that much, right?
Mhm.
Like, I just didn't, because there wasn't that much going on. Like, the paintings, maybe School of Athens, right? Because there's so many figures, they're doing
Yeah.
stuff, or there was one I just did the other day, and I don't remember, I'm spacing on the name of it, but it's one with Dido and Aeneas at the Met.
Oh yeah, I saw that with Luke. You
Yeah,
talked about.
yeah, and because there's like a whole action, but this is like the fact that you did it with this painting of one human just sitting down looking straight ahead, and there's just a green background.
Yeah,
But how you can dig into this was phenomenal to me, and it really opened my eyes as to what
yeah.
was possible for the non art historian. You're an art historian, but for people who are like me, just normal people. And I know maybe you could talk like a little bit about your background as you only took one history class in college, so you didn't get a PhD, or did you? I don't know
I
your
have a
background.
doctorate in classical philology,
Oh,
which
okay.
means in Latin literature.
Okay.
Uh, and I went to the University of Cincinnati, which was famous, not anymore, for integrating classics. So if you did um, literature, you also learned something about archaeology and art history. It was just assumed that you would, and politics. You weren't allowed to just specialize in a certain period of literature and never go out beyond it. Um, so I did have one course in Greek and Roman art and architecture, but I really didn't. Well, I was interested before that because I took art classes in high school, at which I was no good at all.
Mm.
It was an amusing thing to do in high school, and challenging certainly. And my art teacher the summer after I graduated, she gave me Jansen's History of Art, the third edition, which is better in many ways than the later ones, because it doesn't get so diverse and all these things. But she said, I think you'll like this. And I read it, and it was really interesting, but what really fascinated me was they have tables at the end of science and technology and politics and religion and philosophy and art, visual arts and architecture. And it just finally pulled things together. And in all my time in high school, nobody had ever told me that history and everything was connected. That if you looked at somebody's period's art, you could know something about their ideas, the dominant ideas of the culture. And it was just amazing. So I'd been interested because of that. And then I got interested again because of Marianne Suarez's talk. And that really hooked me on studying it.
Yeah, I mean it's in terms of like how it impacts or shows a culture. I think it's probably at least as, if not more, evocative or revealing of the true, like the popular cult art, especially of a culture's true views on the world and themselves and things of that nature. I think you can't understand, the easy example, ancient Greece, without looking at ancient Greek art,
Right.
their sculptures and
Yeah.
architecture, and their literature. Of course, like
Yeah.
if you just read about their history, I think they're like a weird little culture that doesn't make any sense. But when you look at their artwork, it starts making a little bit more sense
Yeah.
why they're
Yeah.
so different and so radically
Yeah.
different than everyone else.
Yeah.
So
And contrary-wise, if you look at the art of the Middle Ages,
yeah,
you start to guess some of the things that must have been going on there, even if you don't know the specifics of the politics in a given region.
well, and also I love how there's this new backlash that we shouldn't call it the Dark Ages anymore.
Yeah.
And because I remember because I'm a film and theater production major, so I did take a history of theater class in college, and so you start with ancient Greeks, ancient Romans, and then basically you skip 1,000 years because there's a play called The Everyman, which is and that's about it, and then there's like very little, and that's it, and then you get into the Renaissance, and it's like,
Yeah.
and people are like, what? How do you not know that this is why it's called the Dark Ages? Because it's like it went dark, like everything went dark for 1,000 years almost.
There's a period from about 500, the fall of the Roman Empire in the West, more or less, to about 800, which is Charlemagne, which is usually called the Dark Ages, followed by the Middle Ages. The classicists, the people who study Greece and Rome, don't want anything to do with the Dark Ages. The people who study the Middle Ages don't want anything to do with the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages, 500 to 800, is just, nobody wants it because there's really nothing there.
Yeah.
You can't do anything with nothing there.
Exactly. So let's talk about where something is there. Let's get into one of the sculptures we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
Do you have a preference of like one you like to talk about? Because I was hoping we'd show people your method a little bit and give them some,
Let's do Nathan Hale.
Okay, the Hale one. I did like this one a lot.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to pop this up so people can see it. Now you tell me which one, which picture to focus on, maybe. Right now, I am sharing it for the first time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Nathan Hale. And they are seeing the full body picture.
I'm not seeing anything yet.
Okay. And so we have a image on the screen of Nathan Hale. I'm going to make sure I get that so everybody can see everything. And you see him standing there. And I'm going to let you kind of guide us through this so I don't fumble this up.
Okay.
And I can kind of zoom in and show whatever you want or go to other, if there's any commentary, I'll help out. But I think you're the expert.
What I usually do first is, we happen to know the subject of this one, and very often you do, but I try and read it without counting too much on the historical knowledge, on the historical background. So in this case, we have a gentleman in probably 18th century dress, and he's standing very tall, his chin is up, but he looks kind of tense. If you put your arms that way, he's got his elbows like a little bit behind his back, which is not a normal way to stand. And the chin is up, but his eyelids are sort of lowered, so he's not making eye contact with people, and it looks a little bit disdainful. Then the next step would be to look at his clothing, and it's tight fitting. It shows how slender he is, and the neck of his shirt is torn away, which is something that no 18th century gentleman would ever. He would not walk around like this. And you say, why is that? And you start looking at the other details, and see, I'm pointing to my screen, and you can probably see my hand, but it's not pointing to what's on the screen. If you look at his elbow in this picture, you can see there's a rope, right?
Yeah, I'm zooming into that so people can see. Okay. So whatever you're talking about, I'll just zoom into.
So there's a rope tying his elbows together behind his back and tying his ankles together. And it's at his elbow so he can still gesture with his hands, which is important because he's probably, he is pictured as having just said his famous line, I only regret that I have but one life to live for my country. This is on the pedestal. There's a picture of that somewhere in your folder. So we have him looking defiant. We have him about to be hung. We know that that's what happens in Nathan Hale. We could also look at the
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure, go.
Well, sorry. So what if we don't know that?
You don't...
Yeah, go ahead.
You could still tell that he's somebody's captive, because he's got ropes around his arms and legs. And I think you could guess that he was going to be put to death by the fact that his throat is bared.
Yeah. Which
is emphasized by the way that high collar sort of frames it.
Yep.
I also I don't know if we have a better picture of just his face. I think we do. Maybe the second picture in your folder.
Yeah, the Hale 0304 2000 or T008. Yeah, this is much closer on his face.
Yeah. Just the fact that the sculptor has built up the hair, he makes it a contrast with the smoothness of the face. and that draws your attention to the face as well. So he's using everything he's got, this sculptor, to make you look at the face, because that's where you read the expression. And he's using everything he can with the pose to show you that something's wrong, but that he's defiant. The reason that I like this sculpture so much, it's one of my favorites in New York City, is that I think it shows not what the founding fathers thought, but how, not what they fought for, but how they fought for it. I think you can only look like this if you know that what you're doing is right, what you're fighting for is right, even if you happen to be in a very bad place at this time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm zoomed really far into his face right now, so it's like the full, and you could see, it's definitely disdain. Like it's hard to tell. Like I'd love to see this in person now, because it's hard to see how much of this is the light coming from the sun. But it looks almost like his lip is somewhat curled, not really curled, but like the tinge of it's about to begin, right?
Yeah,
like it's right there. Not an obvious snarl. I think that would be too much, especially for a distinguished gentleman, perhaps, to kind of show that much. But you can feel. I mean, I can feel the snarl that's there. That's like you're the disdain is a good way of putting it.
yeah.
Where I'm not even, you mean so little to me that I'm not even going to snarl at you. Right? Like that's how little you are to me. And yeah, I mean, looking at it up close like that is really powerful.
I have a sad thing to tell you. This is in front of City Hall Park, and ever since 9/11, it's blocked off.
Oh, no.
It is. So you can get a picture in the distance, but these pictures, the close-ups that we're looking at, are things that I took before 9/11.
Oh, my goodness.
20 years old.
So you can't, so for 20 years, you can't see this sculpture?
Unless you happen to work at New York City's municipal building.
Oh, wow.
Not music. No, it's City Hall. It's not the municipal building, but it's where the mayor has his office. And there is a guardhouse, and they will stop you if you say, "But sir, I only want to go and look at the pretty sculpture." And say, "No."
Oh, man.
I got there once, I think, by contacting the Municipal Art Commission, which has their offices in City Hall, and saying, it's really important to me to get pictures of this, and I managed to get permission that one time, but it's not easy, and it's really annoying.
That is annoying because I'm sure it's lost on the people in that building.
I'm sure it is.
I don't imagine they understand. And this is such an important, you introduced this to me with your book, so I hadn't heard of this sculpture before. And I think it resonated with me today more than ever, just with stuff that's going on in the world today.
Yeah.
The kind of defiance and the strength to kind of have that courage against opposition, against tyranny.
Just knowing that you're right and being willing to stand up for it. It's an important thing. And there's a quote from McMonnies in the book, which says and nobody knew what Nathan Hale looked like. Nathan Hale was a school teacher. He died when he was 23 in 1776. It's not a period when you were taking selfies or having people paint your portrait if you were a Connecticut school teacher. So McMonnies basically made up what he wanted Nathan Hale to look like. Yeah. And he said, I wanted to give the little bootblacks in this area something to look up to.
Yeah.
Something to make them think that life was worth living. And boom. So now you should open.
Yeah.
There's one called Pratt McMonnies Combo, 2 full-length figures.
Is that in the same folder?
Same folder, yeah.
Okay. Pratt McMonnies Combo. Got it. Right.
The figure on the left of this one it's almost the same period. It was done by a different sculptor, and it's also Nathan Hale. And it's a very different interpretation of Nathan Hale. And look at the expression. He looks a little calm, maybe a little awestruck, maybe a little scared. And his arms are tied, so his wrists are behind his back, so he cannot be saying the words that made him famous, that made him one of the heroes of the American Revolution. Um, there's another one. The picture right after that is
Close up of the
close up.
face.
And again, it's just really different. So it's not necessarily Nathan Hale that you like. It's Frederick McMoney's interpretation of Nathan Hale.
Mm-hmm.
And this dates to 1890, at which period there was still a lot of pride in the U.S. and a lot of defiance against anybody who would try to attack us. And it speaks to that.
And I think it's a really powerful. So when is the Pratt one made?
Actually, the Pratt one is almost the same time. If
Okay.
I may be stretching, it was done on commission for Yale University.
Got it. Okay, but when I looking at the two faces now, the Pratt McMoney's head combo.
Yeah.
What strikes me is the heroic face of the McMoney's version, the one on the right of everyone, that he has bone structure that looks like a Greek god, is what I think of, versus the bone structure of a little boy. Like when you look up closer, he looks like a young teenager, which he was very young. I think he was like 20.
Yes.
And this one may even be more accurate, possibly. Although that you said they don't know, but
They don't.
It's possible that he looked, like a normal young boy at this era or something like that. But go ahead.
Just out of college. He just graduated college.
Yeah. And the McMoney's one, even his nose is very strong and powerful. And, he's got high cheekbones. And then, of course, this long sweeping hair, a kind of nobleman's, hair. Whereas in the Pratt one, his hair is slicked back,
It's very well behaved.
Yeah, well behaved, and it feels like the more mannered version of a good little boy, kind of is what I think of.
Yeah.
Versus the McMoney's version, which is a heroic man.
Yeah.
Just in looking at the types of faces. I mean, I think of like with the McMoney's one, the kind of 1950s, 1960s movie star heroes that had very distinguished faces. Very,
True.
The face of a hero. So, anyway.
If you're going to make up the face anyway, if you haven't got evidence, then it says a lot about you as an artist. Whether you make the one the McMoney's made or the one that Pratt made.
Yeah. I agree.
And if you happen to like the one by Pratt better, then it says something about you.
I'm just zooming in on this this full. So we're looking at the full length Pratt Nathan Hale Diderot 2, and
yeah,
I think that's their Diderot. I don't know what that. Sorry.
Diderot it's from Wikipedia, and if I use it in print or on my website, I have to credit it.
Yeah.
Sometimes the Wikipedia pictures have to be credited, so it always has all that stuff in the file name.
Yeah, and his in the Pratt one, looking at that version, his hands are behind his back, but not only behind his back, one arm is like his hands are together. It looks like from looking at the front, right?
Yeah.
Like one hand is his right hand, I think, is straight down, and then his other hand is, I guess, tied behind him next to his one. That one, and they're balled up. In fists, not fists of fury though. Like I'm gonna do something, but they're not relaxed. It's like if he could hide his hands, he would. Is what I feel.
Yeah.
Right. Like he's afraid of being hurt or getting broken fingers or something.
Like he's just kind of holding on to himself.
Yeah.
Trying to keep it together.
Yeah.
Things don't look good. The original of this, I believe, is at Yale, and there I'm pointing again. There's a copy, I think, at the CIA, because he counts as America's first spy because he was in Manhattan collecting information for the American Army, and they found notes in his shoe on British troops and so on. They were written in Latin, but 1776, the British could read Latin, and
Yeah.
so they said, "Uh-oh." He was summarily executed
Oh no.
because spies who were not in uniform, that's what happened to spies. There's also a copy of it in Chicago, if you get to Chicago, somewhere on Michigan Avenue. And I keep hoping to get there and take all angles so that I could see his hands, for instance. But the building that's in front of keeps having construction, so every time I'm there, I've missed it. But there are multiple copies of this if you're interested in seeing it. And also there are copies of the Nathan Hale, because one of the ways that McMonnies made money was to sell reduced copies, so like a 4-inch version. And occasionally you can still get them in New York galleries that come up for sale for, 6 figures maybe, but they do come up for sale.
Yeah, yeah. But if you could do it, good for you.
Yeah,
That'd be great to have one of these guys.
you really would.
What else can we get from this sculpture of the McMonnies? And I also, so what other approaches do you have with your particular method for someone who's not, again, an expert and they're just approaching it? So far we've kind of looked at, just comparing him to another artist. Look at his hands, and you went through a step-by-step looking at the details, which I think is important.
I worked on making the way that I look at sculpture simple enough so that you can remember it on one hand. So you start with an overview, and especially where your eye goes first, because that's probably, if the artist is competent, that's what he's emphasizing. So you look at what your eye goes to first, and also the size, if you're looking at it on screen. The Nathan Hale is, I think, slightly over life size, might be 6 feet.
And he's on a pedestal too.
Yeah. So you look at, you do an overview, what catches your eye first and how big it is. Then you look at the subject. Often you can identify the subject just if you know some history. It's obvious, like the Joan of Arc sculpture. There aren't many females, young females, wearing full body armor, riding a horse, carrying a sword. So if you know anything about history, that tells you Joan of Arc, even if you don't know the name of the work. So you look at the subject second, then you look at the objects, and I take them in a sort of sequence. I look at the body first, and then I look at what the clothing adds to it, if there are any props, what they do, and the pedestal, because the pedestal matters. If it's on ground level with you or up 6 or 8 feet, that's a very different effect. Then I look at the attributes, which is things like, is it smooth or rough? On the Nathan Hale, the fact that the hair is very rough and it contrasts with the face, that actually sets off the face, as opposed to the one by Pratt where the hair is much smoother. There's much less of a contrast. So I look at all sorts of attributes, and then I go back and do another overview with composition and comparing things. But at each step, the way that I get from the just looking at it to working out the theme, which is what the artist was saying was important. After each of those steps, and multiple times if it's a really complicated sculpture, I stop and try and state the theme, state a first theme, just whatever you can get from as far as you've gone from the pose. And then you look at more details and you modify that. You say, no, that's not quite right. And then you look at some more details and you modify it some more. And when you get to the end, you should be able to say what the theme is, and you can check back against where your eye went first, because they ought to somehow agree. If I say that he's disdainful of his captors and his fate, the fact that his face is where you look first and his face has that expression suggests that I got it right.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so I'm curious also, for audience members who are going to be new to this, what at what point would you bring in, one reading the pedestal and maybe even, I don't know how you feel about this, but Googling a little bit because you can now have that ability in order to enhance your enjoyment while you're there. So my view is I try to put that aside for as long as humanly possible and just
Yeah.
use whatever's in your head for as
Hmm.
long as possible. And then this is my view, and I don't know, your perspective on this. And and then at that point, if I really want to get some more out of it, I might Google Nathan Hale. I might Google, like you said, because I may not have a comparison on hand, right?
Hmm.
And that can really
Yeah.
help to have a comparison while you're there. Let's say you're, in Florence and you only get one chance to look at some sculpture on the street or something like that. You don't want to, just look at it and walk away. You want to spend some time with it. And then at what point would you bring in things like Google? Or would
Uh,
you ever, or, recommending maybe
oh,
for someone who's not?
yeah, I do all the time. I use Wikipedia all the time, as much for its references at the end as for the content of the article sometimes. But um, for instance, McMoney's, it would be useful not only to look up Nathan Hale, but to look up McMoney's and see where he was in his career when he did this. I mean, it would be interesting, not necessarily useful for understanding the sculpture, but if you really like it and you want to spend more time with it, then it makes sense to do that. But I would look at it as carefully as you can first, because the interpretations given on Wikipedia or elsewhere on the internet are not necessarily going to be well researched and correct.
I
Um,
would say they're almost not
applicable.
going to be more
Yeah,
than, in my experience, they're
yeah,
more often going to get it wrong than
yeah.
right, which is why this is actually me trying to give an emphasis for these books because, again, like if there's a difference between someone having an expertise in like you and writing a book and someone
Mhm.
who's good at search engine optimization and SEO and they get their blogs to the first page or two page because
Mhm.
and this is my experience looking at a lot of poetry. I do, a poetry show and I've read a
Mhm.
lot of commentary and from the top blogs and they almost always get the miss so much or they get a lot wrong. Some of them are okay, but
Yeah,
if that's what you go on, that could really distort your the ability of your mind to really grasp the
yeah.
artwork. But having a book that really lays it out from an expert who takes their time, who's been doing this for a long time, I think it gives you an edge, and that's why this travelogue thing about learning how to see for yourself is better in a book that you can put. It's not a big book. You if you go next time you go to New York City, just throw it in your bag,
It's
and
a Kindle too.
does it have the pictures in Kindle?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow, okay, so yeah, you could have it in.
Just without pictures.
What's that?
How did I publish this book without any
No, I know.
pictures?
Well, my Kindle e-reader, I don't think it has pictures, but I think like the Amazon ones do.
Yeah.
So, but maybe it does actually. I'll have to check that. I'm sorry if I'm wrong about that. My Kindle e-reader is like pure e-reader.
Mine is a black and white one with a glow screen. It will show you pictures, but they'll be in black and white, which
Okay,
is
so
not a terrible thing in sculpture because it's mostly black and white, light and dark anyway.
yeah, that's true. So you still get it. So yeah, I mean, like you don't even have to have the whole book. An actual book that takes up space in your luggage.
Yeah.
Just have it on your iPad or your Kindle, and you can appreciate it that way versus a blog. And I'm not trying to say, let's say there's a sculpture that's not in this book that you see, you may need to Google stuff. I'm just trying to emphasize this kind of tours that you can go on by yourself or with your family or, as an event. And really, it could be like such a great I'm so excited about it because I haven't done it much, and I'm like trying to sell people on doing
Yeah.
it, and I want to do more of it. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't wait. But anyway, that's my view of.
It's really interesting if you can get other people there and discuss it back and forth. And I used to
Yeah,
go with my husband. We, I lured him by calling it the sushi sculpture tour because he loves sushi. I
yeah,
said, okay, so we're gonna have you can have two bits of sashimi here, and then we'll go look at this and this and this, and then you can have some more sashimi, and you can that. That worked very well.
A little bit for him, a little bit for you. Yeah, I mean, I think like trying to find ways to make it a good activity for everybody. And, obviously don't overburden other people if they're not. And, like I wouldn't recommend a first timer just spending the whole week looking at every single one of these sculptures.
Yeah.
That would be a lot. But, these give you some, I want to go see the Nathan Hale, although apparently you can't, which is tragic. Although you could be defiant like him and break in and go see it. I'm not encouraging but I personally would not be opposed to trying it. If I could manage it, I'd risk the jail time to see a Nathan Hale, because I think he would maybe appreciate that kind of defiance against a government that would put him in a wall, behind a wall,
Yes.
which is ironic.
Dianne,
can you do me a huge favor and pull your camera down a little bit because you tilted it up? Okay. There you go. Perfect.
In the book, at the end of the introduction, I put pictures of all of the works that I was going to talk about. And the point of that was that you might not think you like them before you know something about them, but afterwards you might. So I think you could very easily just pick the ones among there that you particularly liked after looking at the book and just go visit those. You don't have to see all of them. It's a lot of walking and a lot of thinking if you're...
Yeah. It's something you can't do. I don't think you could do it all in one visit for sure. I mean, you could try if you really want. I would try. Next time I think that would be like, but I'm, not everybody's me, and I totally get that. You may want to go, catch a Broadway show. Okay, get it.
Yes.
I get it.
Yeah.
There's other cool things to do.
Broadway shows again.
I just, one of the reasons I'm so emphasizing this is I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine who spent a year abroad in Rome for school. And he lived across the street from the Vatican. And you know how many times he went to go see the art in the Vatican? 0. And I think this is very common, especially if he was in college. He hadn't been exposed to art his whole life. Now he's like, it makes him cry. Yeah, but it's just a tragedy of the way that we live today, and I think the way that we treat art in school. I was public schooled, and I think the way we treat it is tragic, because he had this energy and the time to go see it, and that was the time in his life to go see it. I mean, it's always a good time, but that's the ideal time, and you're 19 years old exploring the world and you live across the street from the Vatican. I mean, come on. And instead, what I think, go ahead.
No, finish what you were saying, and I made a note so that I don't forget this
okay. Well, I just want to tell the story of like why I'm so adamant at people, because I hear a lot of people are big travelers today. It's a huge thing with young people. Big traveler. You cannot date someone if they're not a traveler, that's my experience with dating. If you're not a big traveler, you're out, basically. You got to be a big traveler. And I get it. It's cool. But when people travel and I hear their travel stories, it's like I remember another friend was telling me he was like in Paris and he was, being led down this old art, alley with these cobblestones and this old part of town or whatever. And there's like this old gate and he could see some lights and hear some tinkling. And then he gets into it and there's people just playing beer pong. And it's like, you're in Paris, man. Like you could play beer pong anywhere. Like that's crazy. And my understanding of the way people travel is they travel the same way they live here, which is nuts to me. The way they live at home is that they don't open their eyes. They don't look at new things. They just do the same kinds of things, but just in a foreign place. Right. Yeah. Or they do the kinds of things. Yeah. So anyway,
they do the things that any tourist ought to do, but without really understanding why tourists were expected to do it.
Yeah.
I can tell you this story. Around about 2000, our daughter was 8, I think, and we went on a couple cruises, including one to Europe. And it struck me that all these people really, they were going to see Michelangelo's David because it was the thing to do, but they had no idea why they would want to. And they got there and they're pretty much not seeing it because it's so famous and they have to see it and they're not there to. So I came back and I started working on this series called the Crash Cruise Course. And for years it was in my notes as the Crash Cruise Course. And And it started out as like a 2-hour lecture surveying European art, just to give you a framework. So you could see, yeah, the Greeks did something pretty amazing. And after the Middle Ages, the Renaissance did this. And here are some examples. And that eventually, because that was just too scattershot, that eventually evolved into innovators in sculpture and innovators in painting, which innovators in painting is the one that I'm working on right now. It took a lot more work than I thought. But I used to do each of these as a 2-hour walking tour in the Metropolitan Museum. So you could go and see the actual work that I was talking about that showed some great new way that some single mind came up with to get his message across more clearly, more dramatically, more emotionally, more emphatically. There's a sequence of a couple dozen of these that once somebody thought of it, everybody else at the time said, oh, yeah, that. I'm going to do that. Things like from shading to show volume to linear perspective to show space. There's just a whole series. Leonardo does 3 of them all by himself. Maybe it's 4. I keep waffling on that. But the point of what became innovators in sculpture and innovators in painting is that people just, they're not taught to look. I had no art history when I was in high school, no history when I was in college, except that Greek and Roman, and people just don't know. But if you're curious, then it's really good to have a 2-hour introduction rather than Jansen's History of Art at 1,000 pages with footnotes. Yeah, it could
definitely get too esoteric and too technical if you're not careful. And I think that's what's great about your approach and my approach now and how I approach poetry and literature and everything is, I think people forget that most art is done for non-technical people to appreciate and understand. It's not done for, the handful of experts who know brushstrokes and, every detail of how that works to appreciate. Although if you have that, probably you get a greater appreciation if you have that.
You can get something more out of it if you know that. But the first thing is, do you react to it, and how do you feel about it? I would also say, because I wanted to mention this, that I think Luke Travers' method, you could do mine and his on the same sculptures, and you get even more out of it. Mm-hmm. He's much focused on getting into the characters that you're seeing. But you can use what I'm saying to, say, be able to tell more about why you think this character is reacting this way. And, the hand gestures, the tilt of the head, the posture. So you can do both.
Yeah.
You don't have to choose one or the other. That would be bad.
Well, I think, so here's what I would say to that, having done both myself like you, is I really enjoy the way that you have it laid out very simply to approach a work of art, whether a painting or a sculpture. And then like I said earlier, I've kind of separated myself from, memorizing, do this first, so I have to look at it exactly like that. And I just kind of am able to look at it. So I basically have done it a whole bunch of times with those, here are the 5 things, write it out. I don't necessarily even write it out anymore, unless I am with somebody. Sometimes I'll give them a notepad and let's, write this and see what we think and talk about it. It's good conversation. And instead, I just kind of look at a work of art and then I just kind of know, okay, so where does my eye go? I don't think, where's my eye go? That's where my eye goes. Uh-huh. And then I just think about, well, what does that mean? Why is he looking this way? Why not that way? Why is this person looking at that person? Why is she, and it's kind of, that's the kind of method that I just naturally do. And then, thinking about the medium and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's really nice when you get to the point where you don't have to say step 1, step 2, step 3.
Yeah.
It's nice to have it to fall back on if you get to, if you're stumped and you really want to do something with this.
Yeah. And so, I guess my, the point I'm making is, so you can do that. And then you can also use other kinds of methods like Luke's to, give you a different understanding of it. So, I probably don't even know it, but I have my own somewhat unique amalgamation of your guys's when I approach something where it's like, here's something emotional. I look at this, and then I also think, okay, so why is that person in this, movement, and what does that, tell me? And yeah, like exactly. And speaking of that, why don't we bring up another statue or sculpture? And I thought we would look at because let's talk about the body movement. And I hope I'm not going to mispronounce the last name. Anjou, Dream Big.
It's Anjou. Anjou. I always assume that it's French. I could be wrong.
Yeah, but you're probably right.
French, then.
Yeah, that sounds, even if you're not, that sounds much prettier than Anjou. No offense. It's probably Anjou. That's how you pronounced it? It's Anjou?
Yeah, okay. Anjou.
Now, just so I'm going to pop this up, but just before I do, I wanted to plug the gallery where you can see this.
Yes.
And that is the Quint Cordair Gallery. And this is in Napa Valley. So I'm 45 minutes away from this. I've done a couple shows there. And I love this place. I've met people, that just randomly I met someone at a like a little gathering, basically at a bar, and she was telling me no association with any of us at all, anybody I know, and she was telling me that she makes a Mecca there every year, and to the Cordair Gallery. So this is a beautiful gallery. They have a lot of great art. And, it's definitely within the budget of more people than the ones you were talking about earlier. So it's not the same, in terms of that monetarily. So some of the stuff you can actually walk home with. And this Anjou that I'm going to pop up here, is a Cordair. They show it at Cordair Gallery. They sell it through there. And here it is. Let me pop it up on screen. It is Dream Big. And it is a beautiful one. So this is now on the screen for everybody. And
better higher resolution and a couple details, but I don't, so we can just talk about this.
All right. So do you want to go ahead and lead us again with that?
Well, I'm not going to do the whole.
Okay.
I haven't got enough angles, but looking at it today, what impressed me is how much in control she looks.
Yeah.
The legs are I can't remember the name of the triangle, but they're a stable equilateral. It's not equilateral. And her arms are also braced and in an equal triangle. And a lot of times when you see sculptures that are supposed to be of people dreaming, they're kind of,
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the fact that she...
The poet with his shirt on under the tree, kind of like lackadaisical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But she looks like, if this is her dream, she's got control of it. She's holding on to it and making something happen. I'm not sure what the dandelion is indicating, but it's a really nice piece, and she has a really nice figure. I would love to buy this one for my husband, but space is limited in our house. So,
do you know how big this one is?
I think it
looks life size, but I can't tell.
No, it's not life size.
Oh, it's not life size. Okay.
She doesn't. I'm trying to think. I think she does like half life size and sometimes smaller.
Okay.
I'm not even sure this one was in the gallery when I was there last time. I think I've only seen it in a picture, but I really, but there was another one by her which is similar, and it was, what's that? Maybe 18 inches high.
I can definitely find it. So Dream Big, bronze casting, 8.5, 36 bronze casting.
Okay, so it's probably about 18 inches for the figure, and again, that much again for the dandelion flying at the top.
Okay.
So,
So yeah, really. But yeah, I really like the well, one, it's really interesting that she's in high heels. And I
Yes.
wonder, I wonder what the meaning of that is. I guess, it's like she's her whole figure and her whole body is kind of stretched out, and I have the feeling like the dream is somewhat almost blowing her away with it. So I get the feeling like she might float away, like it's a balloon that might float her away, but she's not going to let go of it no matter what. And
Yeah.
the heels kind of give this sense of she's anchoring down a little bit. That's what I don't know if that's accurate.
I mean, the lines are very nice with the heels. I think if she were standing flat-footed,
Yeah,
it wouldn't be as pretty a line.
yeah,
But I'm not sure that that's what it means, in terms of the theme or the sense of the piece. Um, but I do like the way that it looks, and her posture is very. I really wish I could see her face, and I can't.
yeah. I mean, I zoomed in. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
I think that would really be telling, because it like you said, and I'm getting this figures. She's daffodils have this kind of feeling of ephemeralness to them, right? Like they're going away.
Right.
And there's a famous poem by Wordsworth, of course, Daffodils. I
Yes.
wandered lonely as a cloud, which I've read on this podcast many times. One of my favorites, one of many people's favorites for obvious reasons. Very wonderful poem. But there is this sense of like how daffodils have this very, they're very beautiful, but they don't last very long,
Hmm.
right? And there's something to me, there's something I'm getting from like, she's holding on, it's blowing away. There's one wisp of the daffodil that's leaving, right? So you get the sense that the dream is maybe, and she's like trying to pull it back, and or before it, like, and again, I get that feeling that she's gonna fly away, but she's not gonna let it. And I don't know if the
Yeah.
high heels have anything to do, just having shoes at all, and the type of shoe she has is
Yeah.
a kind of the elegant type that you might wear
Right.
out on a night out or something. So I mean, that's kind of the feeling I'm getting from it, and it's a beautiful sculpture.
It's really beautiful, and it's a good picture too. I'm not sure she actually took it outside with those clouds behind it, but that really works.
Yeah, it does.
It's just the wind. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, this is definitely one that I think deserves to be outside for sure. It doesn't have to be, but I think it looks great, out
Yeah, it's
amongst your garden.
right against a large window.
Yeah,
We could,
yeah,
like I could manage that if I had some more space down here, which I
yeah.
don't. Um, I was going to say something. Oh, did you want to talk about introducing kids to art?
Yes, yeah. I think that'd be great. So we're, maybe one of our last topics we could discuss, because I know a lot of people are at home during this, and this should go out. We're recording on the 6th. I'll try to get it out on the 6th or the 7th of April. And it looks like we're going to be here for another month, at least in this
Yeah.
lockdown. So I know a lot of people are finding and looking for activities for kids and for your kids. And now, by the way, lockdown or no, you should do this stuff with your kids. I
Yes.
recommend reading poetry to kids. A lot of people think I'm crazy, but I believe in reading even more somewhat complicated poetry. I can use words, to children, even when they don't understand it. Now, don't bombard them with it. Don't do like 10 hours of reading at them, but just kind of hearing complex, beautiful sounds. Kids love it. And I think this is true of all the arts, even if just in little snippets, it doesn't have to be a lockdown. Okay. So what about sculptures? All right. So yeah, I think
Okay.
like you don't want to bombard people, and but let's talk about how to introduce your kid to art. And I think that's
Okay.
yeah.
Mostly, I think you have to respect the fact that they're not only your kid, but they're a person in their own right, and people have different tastes in art. And what you like, they may not like. They may not have the context to like it. They may just not like it for some reason. And it's perfectly possible not to like a work of art because the face reminds you of a bully in your school. And, that's your context. And that's valid. You can't have somebody lecturing you and saying, yes, you must love this work of art if you've got something in your past that you dislike it for. So I used to take Allegra to the Metropolitan Museum, and we would never do more than an hour, and we wouldn't be doing an hour flat because we'd be going from room to room. And just let her stop if something interested her. And the thing I remember most vividly is being in the 19th century galleries, and there was a portrait, and so I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, oh, that's Cézanne, and it's a picture of a monk. Well, that's kind of odd for the late 19th century because there aren't that many pictures of monks. And it's he looks kind of grumpy, and so I said, but Allegra had stopped to look at it, and so I said, what do you think? And she said, well, he has one happy eye and one sad eye. And the point is, she was actually looking at the picture, and I'm off saying, oh, 19th century monks, not many pictures, Cézanne, blah, blah. So you can, and the other really good story, I can't remember if I put this in the article online or not, was we're going through the American galleries, and there's a 8-foot sculpture of Andrew Jackson, painted solid white. And it said Jackson on the bottom, and I said, oh, look, it's Andrew Jackson. And Allegra was probably 3 or 4, just plumps her butt down on the ground, which is not generally approved of in the Metropolitan. She plumps her butt down on the ground, and she opens her purse because she'd just gotten old enough to carry a purse, and it was very exciting. And I said, oh, boy, I've pushed it. She's done. She's doing something. And she reaches in her purse, and she'd been saving up her allowance. She had a $20 bill, which has Andrew Jackson on it. And so you have to also give them time, because it's not going to be obvious always what they're doing. But you ask them, what do you like about this? What do you not like about this? What do you think about this? Sometimes I would take her, just let her lead, and she would take me into galleries that, like Tibetan art, that is not my thing. And I would give her paper and pencil and say, just try and draw something that you like. It's probably significant because she likes to play role-play games with knives. She sat down and drew this elaborate dagger. I said, oh, that's an interesting choice. But you have to accept that they're going to have their own tastes in art, no matter how young they are. And in this case, you have to deal with them as if their opinions matter. The quickest way to make them absolutely not interested is to lecture them on to don't, this is important because, and leads to, d. If you're 5, if you're 10, no, that doesn't go anywhere.
Even 34, don't do that to me. I'm the same way. Just like, I want to experience it first. But I think that's great parenting. I'm not a parent, but I think I was a teacher for a short while, and I think that's great parenting advice that more people should probably at least consider. That, because it's like letting a kid, this is Montessori, I taught at a Montessori private school in Southern California, letting them be a unique individual is a big thing that we tend to kind of unknowingly, I think, or not on purpose, beat it out of them. Not literally beat out, but by lecturing them with this and telling, it kind of takes that away. And your approach to art is I think my approach to introducing it to people of all ages, and I think that's wonderful. It's just let them see what actually resonates with them before you give them your already established value judgments that you've been doing for years, thinking about, right? And maybe they'll get there, or maybe they'll get somewhere even better, or maybe you'll have to correct them in 10 years and say, okay, you've thought about this and you've made these mistakes. But that's years down the line, right? Right now they're just living.
Yeah. And it's also true. It's also true of literature. You don't want to, I think the reason so many kids just don't want to read is they're given this list of books to read that somebody has decided will edify them, will make them understand diversity and ecology and all these things. And nobody says, did you like that book? Were you interested? Did the characters grab you? Could you learn anything that you could use just in your personal life?
Yeah.
Um, you can't dictate what people are going to react to in art. It's bad.
Yep.
Bad intent.
Bad intent. And you, so in your article, your first thing is, first, I'm going to show people the article a little bit. So I recommend you can go to this on the Dianne's website. It's at the bottom of the screen. And if you're listening and not watching, go to troubadourmag.com and we'll have all links to everything. But if you go to DianneDuranteWriter.com, don't go to DianneDurante.com because I went there. There's another one. Go to Dianne Durante. I don't know if you know this. There's another Dianne Durante out there.
That's why I'm Dianne Durante Writer, and why my email is Durante Dianne instead of the other way around.
Yeah, exactly.
She's this new age therapist in Florida, and so not me.
Not you
really,
at all.
really not.
Not you at all.
Sorry, continue.
But yeah, so DianneDurante.com or DianneDuranteWriter.com, and you could see this article and it lays it out. The first one, which you've been talking about, is first look, think, speak. So continue. Oh, did I lose you
sorry,
again?
no, you can go through the article. I'm just gonna look at it. You continue.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't read this one. So what other tips do you have for, I haven't read this yet. So the first tip, it sounded like was, just listen to the child.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can certainly say what you think, but not in a way that says, this is how you should think.
Yeah.
The last one is visit some art, which actually is the last thing I would do. If you can just wander up and down streets and look at pictures and point things out and comment on them. One of the things that surprised me is how much she was interested in taking pictures of things. And they were not things that I would have expected. We were walking through a foundry in New Mexico, and I'm looking at all of the non-objective sculptures, and I'm very, very grumpy. And Allegra's down at 3 feet high with her cheap little camera taking pictures of those figures that are made out of, nuts and bolts and rivets and things, that kind of figure. And they really interested her. And I decided that I shouldn't be the one to say, no, this is no good. You should love the Michelangelo's David, and you shouldn't like these. You just turn people off, especially kids.
Yeah, you have to let them approach it. And so people maybe today can't visit art as much, but luckily with the internet and,
Right.
DianneDuranteWriter.com and, different places, you can find lots of resources. And especially now, because you can actually get your, websites on a TV. So like, I know a lot of people have these really nice, expensive HD TVs that show in beautiful detail. And I think we're getting really close to being able to just have a museum in your house, as close as you're going to get. And so I recommend, going to these places, finding some art, and just, even if it's a few minutes at home, exploring them with children, and, maybe letting stuff that you don't necessarily like. It doesn't have to be everything you like. That's one piece of advice that, Dianne just gave that I really love. Just get a wide variety of art and let kids kind of play with it, and just, look it up, put it up on your big old 60-inch, HD screen, and, kind of look through it. So, yeah.
I personally like, for finding art, I like pictures in books because there's so much possibility of getting distracted if you're on the net.
Yep.
But that's not always an option. But I could see sitting down with a copy of one of Robert Louis Stevenson's books illustrated by N.C. Wyeth. N.C. Wyeth did great illustrations. And then you can talk with the kid about what he sees in the picture, and which scene is it that's shown in this picture, and what's the guy doing, and how does he feel? Because that's really what you want to be able to start looking at art and talking about it.
Yeah.
And the illustrations to kids' books are very good for that.
That's a good one. So NC, what was it? NC Wyatt?
W Wyeth, Wyeth,
Okay.
and I might or might not have that on my website.
Well, I'll put links to it, but
That's
it's
not a
Robert
yeah.
Lewis, illustrated by the author, of course, of by N.C.
Robert
Wyatt.
Louis Stevenson.
Oh,
Yeah,
Stevenson. Robert Louis Stevenson.
yeah. Kidnapping, Treasure Island, and all
Treasure
that
Island, yeah.
stuff.
Okay. N.C. Wyeth is the illustrator. So I'm going to link that up for people as well. So that's a good little resource. So you're recommending books, and I've recommended books as well. I think, especially if you can get those big, and you could still order on Amazon, of course, stuff. But if you can get those big picture books, those almost tabletop, so you could see the
Yeah,
paintings, as those
yeah,
are really helpful too. And so
yeah,
this one is one you can read the story and look at the illustrations.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The illustrators who were working around 1900 just did fantastic work, and
Yeah.
it's so pretty. It's so detailed.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's a good little exercise, you can have with kids, and they can enjoy the art because a lot of times that's more, tangible for them to play with the visual arts.
Yeah.
Okay, so before I let you go, you've mentioned once or twice something near and dear to my heart that I have to talk about, because it's confusing sometimes when we're talking about sculptures and then in art, and there's all this abstract art, and it's near and dear to my heart because I hate it so much. And it's and it's such a boon to me, because one thing, or a bane to my existence, because one thing I'm trying to, how do I deal with this when I'm trying to tell people with art, and they genuinely have a positive experience of wanting to share something with me, and they share a piece of abstract art, and I have the same feeling you do about not wanting to destroy them, destroy their souls or anything at the moment, because I know they're trying to approach
Yeah.
it, and they share something with me, and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe, what am I supposed to do with this? I can't say anything about this. And then, so I
You
just,
say, watch my face.
what's that?
You say, what is it that you like about
Yeah,
this
exactly.
piece?
Yeah.
You perfectly straight face serious.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not
That's
going to
my,
attack them, then I think that's the best you can do.
that is my go-to is, so tell me more about what you enjoy about this piece. But, I thought we could maybe conclude about just some thoughts about abstract art, because that's heavily what people are exposed to. And I think there's a
Right.
tendency to categorize art as you have the Nathan Hale and the mishmash of, or let me just put one. There's one that I saw that was just,
Yeah.
you have one that's Gates in your book. It's just
Yes.
Gates, which is the
Yes.
dumbest thing ever. But there's
Yeah.
one that's even dumber. I'm gonna try and one up it. Where it's like they rented out this whole room, and it's just wire, those wire fences that just the normal fences, right? And they just put little pieces of glass in all of them, and they just kind of looped it around, and that was it. And I was like, what? And people are like, this is so pretty. It's like, okay, it makes light come out it weird, I guess. But what the heck is it? What am I looking at? The fence. I'm looking at a fence.
In the New York City galleries, we've gone into places where they had piles of rocks.
Oh man, it's so.
It's just appalling. If you're not communicating something,
Yeah.
then it's not art. I mean, by definition, art has to speak to you somehow, and you're not doing it if you're just throwing trash on the floor or putting glass into fences or hanging giant curtains all over Central Park.
Yeah.
There's I had fun writing this, and I was persuaded not to put it in the book, which
Okay.
maybe I should have. It's on the Turner Prize, which is the big prize, Turner Prize. I think
Turner
if
Prize
you
for art.
yes, 2005 Turner Prize.
Okay, I'll look this up.
And I couldn't put pictures in it because these are all current works, current artists, and I was not going to pay anybody to use their pictures. But there are things like
I'll take a chance and try and show this article. So that he's standing in front of a wood box of some sort, maybe a shed. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, that's one of them.
That's art for you.
And then there's one, and he took the shed down. He turned it into a boat. He went down the river and he put it back on and built the shed again. Hello.
So he's communicating change. Things change.
Yes,
right? That's what he's communicating.
And so I translated some of these. Let me see. Is that Simon Starling?
That was the one that I saw. Yeah. Simon Starling.
Yes. He's fascinated by the processes involved in transforming one object or substance into another. He likes to see things change. He's saying, why do you have to say it so pompously? Because then people would think that you weren't actually saying anything. I like the one by Julian Carnegie, who was doing an ongoing series of bum paintings.
Oh, man. I feel like she just had a fantasy about something, and she was
a finalist.
Wow.
For the prize. Come on.
And now this stuff is easy to make fun of, but I think there's something else that's really going on. And part of it is what I mentioned earlier about the association with, just to use our example, Nathan Hale, right? That the McMoneys, there's just by being in the art realm, they're associated with, oh, there's Nathan Hale, and I'm in New York City, there's that sculpture. And then here's this guy who's doing sculptures too. He just happens to be making a really poorly made shed and then making it into a boat and then putting it back into a shed and then selling it for a lot of money because he calls it art, versus he's just bored and, has nothing else to do. And he kind of knows how to hammer two pieces of wood together, kind of. And so let me make money doing that.
How-to video, maybe it'd be worth something, but
exactly. It'd be great for that. Yeah, it's like, hey, we're the pandemic, we're gonna have the zombie apocalypse. Let's find this guy how to make a wooden shed out of a boat that you have, when you could probably use the boat to get out of here or something at least.
Yes. See, when the zombies are coming, you need to take your shed and make a boat and get the hell out of there.
Get out of there.
Yeah.
So so I think there's be careful. I don't want to tell people. I don't know how to tell people not to be, to enjoy abstract art, because I want them to get to art. But I guess what I always say, and I don't know, we can maybe end on this, and you can have if you have any final thoughts on abstract versus objective art, is I would be open to an artist who did something like this shed or the fence thing if they first did the Pieta. So if they were capable of doing the Pieta and then they did that, then I'd be like, all right, you know what? I don't know what I'm talking about. I can't do any of these things. Tell me more.
Yeah.
I'll say that again.
We'll cut you some slack because you did the Pieta. Well, we want to see what you're going to come up with.
Exactly.
But no.
Yeah. So final thoughts for you, and then we'll wrap it up.
Something just crossed my mind, but it went out the other side. So I did want to mention the Sunday recommendations.
Oh, yeah. Let me pull that up. Go ahead, please.
Anybody who likes to hear me talk, once a week, if you're on the free list, you get 3 recommendations, which include painting, sculpture, architecture, literature, decorative arts, movies, music, whatever else crosses my mind. Sometimes they're related, sometimes they're completely different. I try to make it so that they won't. I would never recommend 3 novels in a week, for instance, but I might do a painting, a sculpture, a poem. If you're a supporter, and there's details of that on the webpage.
So you do a free version.
I do a free version.
And then you also go ahead with the supporter.
The 4th recommendation, which is for supporters, often, but not always, has sort of work in progress, comments on something that's come up because I'm working on a particular book. And I'm not quite ready to make it public. I'm not going to do a blog post, but it's, it feels like an interesting thought that I'd like to share.
Yeah.
So the 4th tends to be special. Sometimes I give people a Henry Kitchell Webster short story because I'm editing his short stories because I like his sense of life very much.
Oh, nice.
And, so there are advantages. The $10 a month level gets a photograph with a quotation on it that's related every month. $5 level, there's a $2 level that's just first Sundays if you want to just dip your toes. And then there are higher levels with other rewards. And I really enjoy that because I spend a couple hours a week deciding what I'm going to recommend and writing up the blog post. And it really energizes me because I do not recommend profoundly depressing art. I don't think we need any more of that. I think if you want profoundly depressing art, you can probably find that without any help from me.
Well, I just saw some with that shed, man.
Yes.
That was depressing to me. What am I looking at here? Yeah, and I have to say, so I get your newsletter, and you don't have to. It's not like you have to do everything recommended every week or anything. You don't feel an obligation. It's great to have it come in. You can see some art, and then maybe take some time during the week because there's so much art out there. I think it requires someone to kind of say, hey, look at this for a few minutes. Otherwise, you're kind of lost in a jungle and you don't know where to walk, right?
Yeah.
And it's, Dianne does a great job of saying, okay, take some steps here, just do this one first and then do that one. And it's great.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I recommend it.
Okay.
So the Sunday recommendations, I recommend the Sunday recommendations because it helps you guide you through it. And there's sculptures, there's paintings, and there's poetry. You also give some poetry, which I love, of course, and
yes,
everybody at Troubadour Podcast does, right? So now I know you have a poem from that you'd like to read for people.
Yes.
Yes, please do.
Oh. This is by Henry Lawson, who is Australian, and it was written in 1898. It's called The Ships That Won't Go Down. We hear a great commotion about the ship that comes to grief, that founders in mid-ocean or is driven on a reef. Because it's cheap and brittle, a score of sinners drown. But we hear but mighty little of the ships that won't go down. Here's honor to the builders of the past. Here's honor to the builders that builded ships to last. Here's honor to the captain and honor to the crew. Here's double column headlines to the ships that battle through. They make a great sensation about famous men that fail, that sink a world of chances in a city morgue or jail, who drink or blow their brains out because of fortune's frown. But we hear far too little of the men who won't go down. The world is full of trouble, and the world is full of wrong, but the heart of man is noble, and the heart of man is strong. They say the sea sings dirges, but I would say to you that the wild waves' song's a paean for the men that battle through.
Nice. Yeah. So it's really pleasant to hear the what's the word I'm looking for? Just the view of the 19th century about
the sense of life.
The sense of life. Yeah. The view of like the sense of life of what's possible for us. Mm-hmm. And, there's the classic example that I was taught is like you have ancient Greeks, this is from Ayn Rand, and the ancient Greeks knew about diseased men, and yet mm-hmm. they projected only strength and power and beauty. Mm-hmm. And medieval period knew about strength and power and beauty, but they only projected gargoyles, right?
Yes.
And or for the most part, or like diseased, pallid individuals.
Yeah.
And I think there's something we should recognize about our sense of life today and what's being lost by not having the power, strength, beauty, heroism that we mm-hmm. had, at least very little of it.
Yeah.
And it's great to see these reminders, even these little snippets. So thank you for that snippet of the past.
You're very welcome. I memorized that one, so I actually own that poem because I memorized it.
Yeah. Yeah, memorizing is a good one when you hear something that you love.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so Dianne, any last things that you wanted to say before we signed off? Because it was wonderful having you.
I think we covered pretty much everything that I wanted to cover.
Yeah.
I'll give you contact information that you can put up there and on your yes and buy my book.
Get this book. It's definitely recommended. Go to New York City, get it on Kindle. If you don't want to take up the luggage space, go to New York City once this pandemic is over and New York City's back to normal, and go see some great art. And,
Yes.
I'm not advocating, but, if you need to, scaffold some walls to get to Nathan Hale, it may be worth it. Maybe we could do a group, outing and
Yeah.
convince them all to let us see this thing so this
Yeah.
dumb mayor isn't the only one who sees it.
Yes.
No
Yes.
offense,
The
you know,
politicians.
the
No,
politics.
well, I have pretty strong thoughts about New York City's mayor.
Yeah, I'm not a
But
fan.
not political.
I
Okay.
don't want to get
I think
political either.
I think we can be done here.
Yeah, but thank you so much for your time and for exploring art with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
Yep.